Okay, people, on this episode of Just for Sport, I give props to Andrew Stockey. He's one of the news anchors and the sports director at WTAE in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And I don't know how he does both, but he does it well. In this episode, we talk about how sports and news has changed during these unprecedented times. Andrew gives his take on what sport he thinks will be able to actually complete a season during these pandemic games, so to speak. And you don't want to miss his hot take on how he thinks the locker room dynamic between the people who cover the athletes and the teams and the athletes will change forever. For the Props Network, this is Just for Sport in 3, 2, 1. All right, Andrew, thank you very much for giving me some time. I really appreciate it.
Always.
Yeah, we go a ways back. I started a little after you at WTAE in 1995 was when
Has
you
it
started
been 25 years?
Yes, right?
Oh my.
But this is a big moment. This is an anniversary, a big anniversary, whether you're married, school,
Oh
sports.
my goodness.
25 years.
Oh, 25 years, my goodness. And they still haven't kicked me out of here. I can't believe it.
You're a staple. And the thing that I was most impressed was after I left TAE and moved back to DC, how I always interacted with you as a sports director. And then you went to be a news anchor. What was the mindset for you to realize why you wanted to do that? Was it for you, but also from the station? Because I always not only respected your sports knowledge, but you were so polished and so good. And I always thought as a news anchor, I looked at you in that realm as much as I did in sports. Like, wow, he's great.
Well, that's very kind. Honestly, it was their idea. This was after the Steelers won Super Bowl 40. I was asked, hey, why don't you give the morning news a try for a week? I'm like, really? And I'd never done news before, so I just sat and anchored with Kelly Fry.
My good friend.
It was fun because I have an interest in things beyond sports. I love politics, at least the way it used to be, where people can actually converse. I love business, so I have a knowledge of things well beyond the field of play. So they asked me to give it a try. Apparently, it went well, and I think at that point in my career, I said, you know what? I've been doing sports in Pittsburgh for 10 years. Steelers finally won a Super Bowl. Pirates, who knows what's going to happen. Penguins, we'll see what happens. But why not do something a little different? Because I just felt that's where the future was going. And so I did news exclusively for, 5 years. Before I finally, they said, Andrew, we'd like you to come run our sports department again. I'm like, well, I can't do both. I said, yeah, you can. I'm like, what? So I have this interesting career that not a lot of people have, where I anchor the 5 o'clock news. And then I do sports at 6 and 11 o'clock, and I'm the sports director. So as I tell people, half my day is, the serious stuff of the world, and then half it's fun. At least that's the way it used to be. So that's how I made that transition. And it's 2 jobs. It really is 2 separate jobs, and it's a lot of work because you are balancing 2 things at once. But in many ways, it's never boring. I never come in here and say, oh, gee, what am I going to do today? Because news is always different. Sports is now changing a lot more than it used to. It used to be just have the game that day. So, and a long story short, it's challenging. And I think that's one of the reasons I enjoy doing it. And I'm very thankful Channel 4 has the confidence in me. And I think the viewers buy into the fact I do both. They don't sit there and say, well, why is he doing news or why is he doing sports?
Yeah. And that's rare. Like, I don't know of many people in any market in my experience that actually gets to do both. I don't know how you can deal with disseminating all the information, because to just be the sports director, you got to be on it and know what's happening, and you're doing both. How has it also been more of a challenge? Because you are a techie. So if anybody can do it, it's you, and you're at the station now. But when COVID hit, what was it like for that transition to have a home studio and, working with Zoom for interviews and things like that?
Well, I have to admit, before this happened, I thought Zoom was that show on PBS when we were kids. I didn't really, I didn't know anything about it. But obviously I had to broadcast from home. I was staying at home for a couple of weeks, and I was in here for a couple of weeks because that was just what we were doing at that point. So I learned about Zoom. I learned that Zoom is actually a good thing in that you can get people to talk to you anytime in a way that it's less intimidating for them. You can get athletes, for instance. Athletes are always tough to get to sit down and do an interview and come to their house and all this. But if you say, hey, can I get 10 minutes with you on Zoom? you'd be amazed at the number of athletes that will do that.
Yeah.
And that's what makes this technology so great. You can talk to anybody. I think also we have an app now on our phones that allows us to broadcast from home. It's not the best quality, but it's good quality. I think viewers understand now that everything, doesn't have to be in HD. It just has to look halfway decent, and they'll watch because they're watching for the information. So I think what has happened now is we are so reliant on technology that it really is as important as the information we're disseminating. I've got you here, I've got two screens here, I got a keyboard here, I've got two phones. Well, I got one phone. That's my other phone. I've got all these things with me, and they're all tied together. And being able to master all those keeps you in the loop on everything. The bad news is it's hard to let go. I mean, when you're on social media, you know this. Facebook, Twitter, people who follow you want information from you, and you have to give it to them, at all these different times. So not a lot of sleep, a lot of waking up in the morning, let me get on my phone and tweet a few things. So it's demanding, but the technology allows us to do so much more than we could before. It allows us to go places and talk to people that perhaps we wouldn't get to, in my opinion.
Yeah, you got to get on TikTok soon.
No,
right?
No. Well, you heard Amazon drop TikTok, and I'm not doing that. No, well, I mean, after the State Department was warning us about it, I figured maybe I need to skip that.
Okay. One thing that none of us wanted to skip, but we had to, is a finish to an NBA season, finish to the NHL season. The Penguins were right in it. What has that been like for you to adjust to, also trying to do new sports stories? Some of your stories have been a look back. You recently did a story today, and a matter of fact, on the Russian Red Army team that was associated with the Penguins being a part owner in the 90s. Has it been almost fun to have to find a new way to come up with stories and content?
Well, thank you for watching, first of all. I don't think, honestly, I think there's news every day. I think people want to know, okay, how soon are we going to return to the field of play? How soon will our athletes take part? What are they thinking? What are they feeling? We have not had, you have a couple of days where there's not a lot going on, but for the most part, there are a lot of stories, and a lot of the stories do look forward. Now, the story about the Penguins and the Russian Red Army, there's a film coming out, and I was able to get Howard Baldwin, the former Penguin owner, to talk to me. So I think what has happened now is that, there's sports news. It's just not scores and highlights. I think that's always been my problem with sports coverage. It's like, we do highlights. Well, that's great, but we just saw the game. Right. Tell me something I don't know. And that's what we've tried to do now. When people watch local sports now through COVID-19, chances are you're going to hear something you probably haven't heard, or an interview you probably have not seen. We're seeing more exclusive content, I think, because we're being forced to find those stories. And I think it's what makes what we're doing very important and valuable. I had an interview with the Whitfield executive director last week to talk about, okay, where's the Whitfield stand on the return to high school sports? And that's stuff that you're not going to find anyplace else. So I think in many ways, it's challenged us to find new stories to tell, but it's easier to tell unique stories than it was before. We're not relying on just highlights. And that's one thing I hope through this, we don't go back to. Everybody saw the game. Tell me something I don't know. I showed 3 plays from a Pirate game. That's all you need to see.
Yeah. And I agree with you there. Like, I think I enjoy watching you now. Not that I didn't really before, but like you're saying, I can go on my phone and see the score, but it's the other stories, either around the game or outside of the game or in the middle of the week in between games. If you're talking football, right, you really are hearing about more and getting to know players more, and it also brings out a little more of your personality too.
But the hard part, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but the hard part is now, I think as easy as it is to get athletes on Zoom to talk, I still think you have a hard time because you're kind of at the mercy of, whoever's available that day, or let's say the Penguins. Okay, they're in camp. They make a player available. You can't go and have that locker room conversation with a player anymore. I don't think I'm going to be in a locker room ever again. I think it's the one thing that's done.
Okay.
I highly doubt it. Even if we get a vaccine, I highly doubt we'll be in a locker room ever again. So that kind of interaction where, especially print reporters, will get those one-on-one interviews because they walk in, they have that kind of relationship. This changes that dynamic, I think. You have to either know the person or have a contact, and I'm sure a number of writers do, but we're not going in a locker room again. That I don't see that happening even when this is done. And that's my opinion.
Wow. I mean, that's huge, Andrew. I mean, for you to not only, I mean, I never thought of it that way, that we are never going back, but I do think even if there is a vaccine, I mean, you see all of the players saying, you know, for at least for the NBA and NHL restart, and then MLB with like, hey, we were tested, and then all of a sudden a bunch of players tested positive, and how do we quarantine them? It just seems like it's very complicated. Do you see a season happening this year, or is it better if you have players already saying, I'm not quite sure anyway, if I want to come back, that maybe you put a pause on it and say, let's pick back up in 2021?
Well, let's go by sport and talk about that. Baseball, yes. Even though we have more positive cases, I think baseball is going to happen by the nature of the sport. Basketball, I think, is going to be stopped just by the nature of basketball. I mean, basketball is what? You're in somebody's face.
Yeah.
You know, nobody's 6 feet apart playing defense. So at some point, they're going to be, if somebody gets diagnosed positive during a game, they're going to shut it down.
Yeah.
And this bubble is great and all, but I don't know if it's going to work. I really don't know. I mean, the bubble is surrounded by the state that has the
most cases, right.
So I mean, that must be a heck of a bubble. So hockey, hockey I think will work. And I say this because hockey is a sport, and I think you have to really think about the sports that we're talking about. For instance, like golf. I mean, they can play golf. They won't have any problems. As long as you don't have fans, these guys can stay 6 feet apart, that's fine. Hockey, I think because of the speed of the game, because they're wearing shields already, fighting will be disallowed, obviously. But I don't think the spread of the disease, in my opinion, from what I see as the game is played, is going to be a problem. Football, I don't know how. Because football, by nature, is about contact.
Yeah.
It's about holding somebody up. It's about being in the trenches. Even if you're wearing a shield of some sort, you're going to be there for an exposed period of time, as opposed to hockey. Hockey, you hit somebody, boom, they're down. Football, it's like this 5, 6, 7 second, whatever. So I don't know. I mean, I want to see football. It's going to be hard. It's going to be really hard. I mean, we're still at the point where basically everybody's kind of like doing these little calisthenics and these little running drills.
Yeah.
But can they get on the field of play and actually play the football the way that you and I know football be played?
Oh, yeah.
That's going to be a challenge. And I, at this point, when people say, are they going to play? I always say, okay, you tell me how they're going to play. And I really haven't quite heard that in football.
And especially when yesterday it came out that they were going to ban jersey exchanges. And it's like, that takes 30 seconds. You think it's okay for players to have full contact? That does seem like, I don't know how you could have one but not the other.
Well, that's bizarre. I mean, it's like, the post-game handshake, really?
Yeah, the post-game handshake.
The high five,
yeah,
really?
Yeah.
It's the play, it's every single play where you're hitting somebody and there's contact for, I would think, at least 5 to 10 seconds on every play. So that's where I think the danger is. But like I said before, I do think that the leagues have been very responsive and not tried to, they've listened to their players, they've listened to their medical personnel. I don't think there's a league I've seen where they've said, like, they've dismissed the science. And they're being very careful. And I think that's a good thing. Whether that leads to getting back on the field remains to be seen. But at least I think every sports league realizes this is not something you can rush into.
And I know we didn't talk about it necessarily, didn't bring it up, but even in soccer, MLS, 2 teams already dropped out. They're like, we've had 6, 7 players that are tested positive. We've got to quarantine them, and we don't have a team to field anyway.
And that's soccer. That's soccer. That's a sport where you're really not near anybody except for that few seconds where you're kicking the ball. So, that's why the contact sports, like football, and I put basketball under contact because that's what basketball is. The intimacy of basketball is what makes it a great sport. The fact that the players are right there, right in front of you, they're on top of each other within that arc. That's what makes basketball such a great sport. I don't see how you can tell people to back up 6 feet and play basketball.
Yeah. Now, you talked about golf. You play golf. Have you been able to play? I imagine you have, but what was that like having to keep that social distance? And have you enjoyed the actual coverage of the PGA Tour without fans?
Well, I've had very little time to play golf, to be honest with you. I mean, because of what's going on work-wise. I hate to say this, I played a round and a half so far this year.
Oh, wow. I
don't have time. You just don't have time. I mean, with everything going on in the world. And you have to remember here in Pennsylvania, the courses didn't open for a month and a half. So people couldn't play golf. In terms of playing golf, I don't think there's a problem. I mean, you're socially distanced. You're not grabbing the flag anymore. The flag is in there. It's a relatively safe sport, and I'm not really worried at all about that. As for on television, it's odd. I remember the first tournament I saw at the Colonial. And whatever they call it now in Texas. And some guy hit a hole in one, and I didn't hear anything. And that was odd. It went right in the hole, and you heard maybe like a distant, like, hey, and that's it. So golf, I think the good news about golf is the sport doesn't change. And then Tiger's coming back next week to play. I think golf will do okay. I think people will watch, especially with Tiger back. They're going to try and play all these majors in this small period of time.
Right. Yeah.
And I think that's going to be exciting. The biggest challenge, I think, with golf, and really, I think with every sport, is that everything's been pushed back now, where it's going to happen between August and October. Think about every weekend between August and October. You're going to have, 2 Triple Crown races in horse racing. You're going to have all 3 majors, I think. 3 majors. Yeah. You got the NFL season kicking off. You got college football going on. You got the baseball pennant race and the World Series. You got the Stanley Cup final. You got the NBA final. All within 2 months.
Yeah.
It's almost overload. It's almost too much. And I think all the sports are probably going to, at some point realize, well, we're fighting each other to get on TV. I mean, what do you watch?
Yeah.
What do you watch every night? Is the NFL king? Do you watch the Stanley Cup finals? Do you watch the NBA finals? What do you watch? It's almost too much now.
And I always thought that at the network level, they're coordinating, and I know they were in different places, but they were saying, hey, your games are on Wednesday, we'll have our game on Thursday. But like you're saying, when they're all in this small, 2-3 month period, it's like there aren't enough days, there aren't enough hours, at least for the beginning of the NBA. They're talking about playing from noon to 8. MLB is going to do, they've already had day games, so they kind of do that, but it is going to be a lot.
Well, what you're doing is splitting the audience. I mean, the Masters is going to be on Sunday, the final round. There's going to be NFL football on that Sunday. Okay, so what do you watch?
Yeah.
I mean, and I think you divide up your audience. I think the NFL will still be king, but if you've got Tiger in the final round of the Masters, you're going to take a whole lot of the audience away. Plus, let's say you got Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Finals on a Sunday night up against Sunday Night Football. I think there's a real scheduling issue that has not been addressed yet. And, we're going to be at the point where we've gone from no sports to almost too much.
Yeah.
Of course, this is assuming everything happens. And I think that's the thing. There are a lot of question marks. I mean, college football right now, I don't know. I don't know how. Don't know how.
They're already saying conference-only games, and it's like, well, who's going to be on campus? And football is football. It doesn't matter what level it is. If you're saying, hey, I don't know if the NFL is going to happen, then how can you ask college athletes who, many of them are, still under their parents' guidance and saying, hey, I don't want my kid out there being exposed. I mean, it's a big gamble. And it's a lot of money lost. I mean, Ivy League already canceled their sports. I mean,
well, it comes down to the money. I mean, that's why I've heard talk of let's move college football to the spring, which would work technically if the situation is any better in the spring. I mean, we still don't know if we're going to have a vaccine at this point.
Yeah.
And a lot of what's going on, what we're talking about, is vaccine dependent. If the same conditions exist in the spring that exist in the fall, how can you play sports? I think a big question around here is high school football. How's it happen? Can it happen? We don't have testing on the high school level the way you have in college and pros. And I even talked to, who did I hear from? Not somebody told me, I think it was Dr. Deborah Bogan from the Allegheny County Health Department said, look, they have the money to test every day. They have the money to put these athletes in bubbles on the professional level. High schools don't. These are high school kids. They go to class, they hang out with kids all day, and then they have to play football. So, realistically, can high school football happen? It's not my call, obviously, but I'm just sharing with you the question marks and the scenarios that people are considering right now as they try to decide in the next month whether they should start this up or just shut it down.
Especially when you talk about football as king, in Pittsburgh, I can't imagine what it's like to not have high school football, not have the Pitt Panthers at Heinz Field, not have the Steelers at Heinz Field. They already lost that Hall of Fame game in Canton, Ohio, where it's going to be a big day for Troy Polamalu and the other Steelers going into the Hall of Fame. I just can't see a city like this, one of the ones where the fans travel, they love the black and gold, not having football.
Well, I think we've learned over this time that there are other things in the world. That's been probably the greatest lesson. We spent more time with our families. I think I know I've gotten back into running, something I didn't do for a long time. And you see people walking.
Mm-hmm.
People are spending more time doing other things. They are finding their weekends aren't about sports. I mean, for a while, we watch all the reruns of all the great games.
Mm-hmm.
When I think we all kind of realized, okay, this is not sports. This is a rerun of something we've already seen.
Mm-hmm.
And golf was great. NASCAR was great. But we began to realize that, what? It's not the sports we know. The fans aren't there. And the fans are a big element of this.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you don't think they are. But then when you watch a sporting event and you don't hear the roar of the crowd. I mean, baseball in 2 weeks is going to be very interesting. To watch a baseball game in an empty stadium. And I don't care if it's the Red Sox and the Yankees. There's something missing if the fans aren't there. Mm-hmm. And I think that will take away from it. And this whole pumped-in crowd noise is a nice thought, but it doesn't replace the fan experience. So I think we're going to find that, as much as we love sports, we realize there are other things in the world. We'll be happy to see it. We'll be happy to watch it. Will it monopolize our time the way it did before? Not if it's not the sports that we really know in the presentation that we know.
Yeah. And I've watched that Korean baseball league that they had on ESPN.
God bless you, because I can't.
Carl Ravitz is trying to do the play-by-play.
I don't care. I don't care. Look, I went down spring training and saw 3 games, okay? The week that they shut everything down. Mm-hmm. So I saw baseball. I got my baseball fill.
You got your baseball fill.
I tried to watch the Korean baseball league. I'm like, I don't care about the teams. I don't care about the players. It's not the Pirates. It's not the Cubs. It's not the Reds. I don't care.
Yeah.
I want to see my team play.
And I know it's kind of controversial, but funny in a funny way that they tried to put dolls in the stands in some of the leagues overseas, and they were, I guess, sex dolls or models.
They're going to put cardboard cutouts of fans in the stands in Oakland. Apparently.
Yeah.
In Kansas City. Why?
Well, the thing is, like, if you can't have fans, right. I would say, what if you tried like the iPads with everyone's a Zoom and have a fan on the iPad, and you can at least have that noise, coming out of iPad, and you can
almost rather have an empty stadium.
Yeah, it's going to be tough.
I'd rather have an empty stadium, frankly, if that's the case.
In your time covering sports and news, you read your bio and you talked about moments in history that you will remember that you enjoyed covering. For me, at least, I thought about things that mattered to me when I was in Pittsburgh. First one was I first came here, and it's like, hey, Three Rivers is coming down. You and I were across by Point State Park.
Right.
Will this go down in history for you as one of the more historical times that you've had to work in news and sports? And I also say that not in terms of just COVID, but then we add on to it Black Lives Matter. And I also feel like now more than ever, athletes are having more of a voice. It's worked for good in some cases. Natasha Cloud, Colin Kaepernick had a tough time. Now we got Deshaun Jackson dealing with, his issues. But athletes have more and more of a voice. And with COVID, it just everything it's all coming together. It's just tough.
Well, if we're just looking at it from a sports point of view, and I don't even think you can even do that. I think you have to look beyond that. But it's without question the most significant time in our lifetime. And if you are a journalist right now, this is the biggest story you will ever cover. Coming into this year, I thought the presidential election would be the biggest story of the year. I had no doubt that would be the story. And it's important, but it's not as big as what has preceded it that will set the stage for what happens this fall. It is a significant story. It's very important. And I think, how we present it, how we cover it. I mean, the pandemic was enough. I mean, that was already, this larger than life story. Then all of a sudden, the protests, the battle for racial equality, the George Floyd reaction to his death. It has really been just overwhelming and all-consuming. But what it's done is it's changed the way that I think people converse. I find now that, we're having open discussions about race in a way that we hadn't before. And we're talking about things about race every day now that we hadn't talked about before. So in many ways, we talk about we need to have a discussion. Well, now we are actually having a discussion. And as journalists, the job now is to present these discussions in a unbiased, let's not take one side, let's present the whole vision to our audience. and let them decide. That's the biggest challenge, because we live in a hypersensitive world now. And we can't afford to, take a side one way or the other. We have to present, here's what's going on. And people, it's very sensitive. You have protests, you have people who are angry, you have people who want change. You have a society that actually is wanting change. I mean, you have corporations now that are spending money. Here, PNC Bank here is donating $1 billion to racial equality and social justice. $1 billion from a major company. You have leagues, the NFL, the NHL, the NBA, saying, yes, we think Black Lives Matter. We have that. It's something we never would have heard 4 years ago. So things have really changed. Now, the question now is, what happens next? We're talking change. Everybody wants to see change. There is a problem. And everybody, whether you're white, black, whether you are rich or poor, no matter where you come from, everybody realizes something is wrong. So how do we change it? That's going to be the story to cover over the next 6 months, year, 2 years, 5 years. And I think that's maybe the most interesting thing to see, what comes of this. Because now the protests have kind of quieted down to some degree. Everybody's talking now, so what happens next? And I think that will be more so than anything else the interesting story of our lifetime. But what we're going through right now, this is something that, this is the biggest story I've ever covered. It's not even close.
Yeah. And with the athletes really trying to change the narrative and take control of their, I don't want to say that the league is changing, like it's shifting. The owners obviously still have control of the teams, but the players, their platform seems to continue to rise in what they can say and how they can sway the fans.
Well, including the owners. I mean, to get Roger Goodell to say the NFL thinks Black Lives Matter after that video came out was significant. That's something I don't think anybody thought would ever happen. The players, they realize their power, but now because the national mood has moved and there's a national feeling, now they're in the position where they can speak out and say, okay, let's push for this. Let's get this done. Let's seek this change. That is what has changed. The athletes have always had a voice, but now their voice is being amplified by the public at large. I think the National Football League, for instance, realizes that, corporate America is understanding the conversation and understanding what's wrong. So we better get on board.
Last question.
Sure.
How proud of your career when you look back on it and you think of being in Black Lives Matter and the conversation of representation, like Joy Reid, she just got a slot on MSNBC, and they talked about how one of the few African-American women that also are in a prominent role. And here you are very prominent in Pittsburgh and representing minorities, but also saying, hey, there still needs to be change on this level too, to be able to see more people of color representing the community on television.
Well, I think not only on television, but behind the scenes, people who make decisions. It's funny. I never thought about myself as I'm this African-American role model who has this position and is representing Black America. I never really think about that. I think about, I am a person who presents, this is what one Black person is like. And I know I've spent a lot of time in a lot of communities outside of Allegheny County where there aren't a lot of African-Americans. I've always tried to say, hey, look, you know what? You may have an opinion or an idea of what people who look like me are like. Well, here's somebody who maybe is a little bit different. And I've always tried to be positive and always try to present a professional demeanor. If what I do inspires people to either pursue this profession or to change the way they look at African Americans, then I'm happy. But I never go into it thinking like that, because I think my job is to inform the public, and try to share stories that are important to everybody. What has happened through, since George Floyd is there is now an appetite for people who want to listen, who want to hear more of these stories. We're doing something here called WTAE Listen. It's part of our Project Community series, where we are listening to Black Pittsburgh. We just did a panel discussion I did with 3 prominent African Americans in our community of different age groups, different backgrounds. And basically the question was, okay, we've had these protests. Now what? What did we learn? What are the issues and what do we do moving forward? And the fact that I can actually be on the air and share those conversations, whether you're a black journalist or a white journalist, that's what you want. They may be uncomfortable, although I think every day they're becoming more comfortable because now people are talking about it on a regular basis. So I think to summarize, I mean, I'm an African American and I'm very proud of it, but I never go after a story thinking, okay, let me look at this from my point of view, because people don't care what I think. It's finding the people who deal with this on a daily basis, who face these issues, and letting them tell their stories. It's not about what I think. Sports is one thing. I mean, I'll share my opinion, but this is not about what I think. It's about me giving people a chance to share their thoughts and their stories, and then let the viewer decide. And
it's real news, not fake news. You're hearing from actual people, right?
Well, I think
WTAE is listening.
Well, my news director said the truth will set you free. And people can sit there and say they object, or they don't believe in you, or you're doing this. But if you have the facts and you can source everything, then you can sleep at night.
I can sleep at night too. Thank you, Andrew. I really appreciate
you're
you
welcome.
giving me some time. All right, I want to thank Andrew Stockey for joining me on Just for Sport. Really had a good conversation. And hey, if the locker room changes forever like he says it will, I am going to miss that interaction that we would have with athletes, the way you get to know them, you get the inside access. And then there's a relationship built that isn't just about how you played the game, but you get a better perspective on the person. And even in my career, when I look at how I got to see John Wall and Bradley Beal being drafted as rookies, and now they're on their 10th and 8th year respectively in the NBA, and there was a relationship built that you got to know them, and I will miss that. And it just will never be the same if all you get to talk to as athletes is something like this with Zoom. It just won't be the same. But we'll see how it goes, because you never know. Times may change again, and then we can be back in the locker room. All right, that'll do it for now. Until next time, ciao for now.